Instead of making the ship faster, how about installing some seatbelts?
Seatbelts are dead weight. I feel the need for speed.
Yes, but I feel the nafety for safety.
Oh, fuff.
Okay, next item of business is to actually deal with the modification of the dash to accept the doubled-in stereo. What that entails is removing this section right here that is kind of a shelf that the old stereo used to sit on. I am going to go with the little vibrating saw method and just a very fine blade, work my way through it, take it out in pieces. You're not going to get to watch because I can't hold the camera and do my cutting at the same time. I may look into if a different blade would be better. There are some that might play nicer with the flush cut idea than this little blade I've got here. One thing to be very careful about in this space is you do have some wires, and this harness is actually right there up against the back side of the little piece that we're trying to remove. And in fact actually has a push clip right here where my fingers are that is potentially going to be a problem because we want to remove that push clip from this. You also have your HVAC controls and some other things in here that really would not take well to being cut. So be careful, go slow, use your cutting tool of choice for this. I actually think even maybe a hacksaw blade would work. This is just plastic. But the idea is to just take this out to make room for the stereo to fit in. Okay, so the little reciprocating saw worked pretty good. What I ended up doing was just cutting out right through here and right through here, and then I went vertically through the material that goes to the back. And this was kind of a case of looking at it in terms of where the material was at, because this just went straight back inside the dash and really didn't connect to anything, and with the little shelf here removed wasn't going to add a lot of strength. So rather than trying to work through and cut through all of this material in here, just went vertically either side, and that actually gives me a lot more open space. And start looking at this dash and realizing that this harness can push all the way back into here. This is your AC duct at the back of this. You've actually got a huge amount of space that you can get your, back in here behind the dash, on that side, and back in here behind the glove box on this side. You've got a lot of space inside the dash on this. Just a whole lot of space to do whatever you need to do as far as putting your stereo in and routing everything else. Now you do have some wires. I mean, this will be our HVAC wiring here that does have to kind of remain in this general vicinity, but it's not going to be all that big a deal to accommodate and make our stereo fit. So we're now to the point where things start getting put back together as opposed to being taken apart. And so the first thing I want to do is just kind of, with nothing else in the way, understand how and where this dash assembly is going to sit. And so there's no clips installed on it, no retainers at this point, so it's just sitting in here to understand what its fitment looks like. Then we're going to come back and put the head unit in place and then try to work through the fine detail positioning on the stereo itself. And we have our first look at the stereo and amplifier actually attached to the dash. So it goes in here, goes in really well. This Alpine unit with the kit, at least in its initial position, There is a little bit of a sense that maybe it is just a little bit wider than the kit is really expecting, by just, a couple of millimeters or whatever. Let's see what we can do here as far as positioning the cover. Let's see if I can do this with one hand here. And just work the wires around and kind of through some of the holes so that we can, again, let the whole thing seat in. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video and then get it situated, and we'll see what it looks like. Okay, our first test fit. Everything is in place. The radio is coming through the bezel like it should. It does seem like maybe it is just a hair bit low. We've got a little bit more of a gap at the top than I would like, and maybe a little bit shallow. It would be nice to bring this out a little bit so that it's not sitting behind the bezel when, although the bezel may suck back in just a little bit more from where it's at here, when everything is in place. But I think, yeah, just bring the head unit forward a little bit. See if we can maybe bring it up just a hair, and I think that's going to work out really well. So starting to do the final install for the head unit here. This is routing all the wires, connecting all the wires, making sure everything is not braided, tangled, or otherwise going to be a problem for us later. Dealing with things like, this is a microphone here that's tucked back behind and then routed around and sitting up on top of the dash there. This is just a lot of sort of untangle and make sure that things are connected to the thing that it needs to finally be connected to, and that wires are generally routed where they need to go so that as the stereo goes in, wires can be pulled back. There's actually a fair amount of space between the back of the amplifier and the air conditioning duct back in here, but things will need to be sort of pulled to either side as it gets put in to avoid tangles and complications later. This is the USB off the back of the stereo. We're going to go ahead and route this so that it lives in the glove box. That way, if you've got an iPod or something that you need to connect, you can put it in the glove box and it's out of the way. Or if you need it up here, we'll have the ability to kind of run this, but you're going to have, like if you've got a phone here, you're going to have another cable that goes to your phone, because this is the, the female connector. So you'd run your female connector down into the glove box and then whatever you need, and you can just kind of tuck any extra cable back down into the glove box. This is the wiring for our mirror. This is the hardwire kit, and we made the provision in our stereo wiring to connect these up back here. So we need to connect so the orange is for something else. We need to connect our red to the red, our black to the black. We'll need to trim this up because the heat shrink blocked it. And then our yellow to our yellow over here. Our 3 wires for the connector for the power mirror. This is our illumination light circuit that will need to come down to support the switches down here. This is our satellite radio receiver. Our satellite radio antenna ended up right here. It's the same idea. We need to make the connection from the antenna to the receiver. And then this will get tucked back in here behind the glove box. This is the physical connection between the radio and the factory wiring harness. These just click together like so. This is wiring that we may use at the future point. One of these goes to our backup lights, which is a trigger for the built-in backup camera functionality. The other goes down to our parking brake to inform the radio when the vehicle is stopped with the parking brake engaged, which allows to unlock if you wanted to play movies on your dash. Not something we're anticipating a lot of use for in this vehicle, but we will go ahead and tuck this wiring back up in here as well, so that it is available at a later time if we want it. Okay, so for the antenna, this is the factory cable for the TJ that went from the back of the stereo down to this connector that's down here in the glove box area. Now, this connector looks very much like this connector, so realistically all that would be necessary is an extension or a cable that's long enough. This connector is the same as this connector, so if it was long enough it would just plug in. You could just do an extender, an extension cable if you had one. The kit that I bought came with this adapter cable here, which is definitely not the same end on this. However, this end and this end are the same. And so what this is an adapter to go from this connector to the connector that was on the back of the factory stereo, and then this is the length necessary to get to that other cable. So we're going to go ahead and use this Metro part here, this 40CR10 adapter, to give us the ability to use the original factory wiring to get back to the other side. So that just plugs in there. This plugs into the back of the stereo, and then this feeds down and into that connector. And I think that is now all of the wiring that connects to the back of this stereo. When we took these out, we actually pulled all of these vacuum lines out as well. It was easier to disconnect them from the HVAC box over here than it was to disconnect them from the controller. So now what I wanted is make sure we get all of our wiring so that we can route this back through the way it came originally. And plug it back into the environmental control box here. It just clicks in.
I need to flip it 180 degrees. There you go.
And that will make the wiring line up a lot nicer too.
That was the hope.
Should not need to force anything into place. So if it's not feeling like it wants to go, take it apart, try again. Now, with those in place, let's do a quick double check on the cover panel. bezel. That is looking pretty good. I think with the adjustment, we got the depth on this head unit a lot better. It's sitting much closer to flush with the dash. It could still be just a little bit higher. And the gap here at the top is quite a bit bigger than the gap at the bottom, but that is as high as the mounting screws really wanted it to sit. So I think that's where it's going to live. So now we need to connect all of this to our switch panel and mount our switch panel to the dash. So with this project, one of the things that we're doing is all of this wiring was supporting the factory switches. So this is switches that ran the rear windshield wiper, the rear windshield washer, factory lockers. All of this is basically being abandoned in this project because we're not going to preserve any of those switches or any of that functionality with the vehicle. So one option certainly would be to just cut all of this off, make it go away, make it disappear. We are, however, going to use these factory accessory wires and our existing wiring that goes up to that comes off of that accessory wire and goes up to our CB radio. So we need to arrange either to delete the wiring we're not using or to clean this up so that it will fit behind our switch panel in this space. So we've done a little bit of cleanup and rerouting. These are our wires that go up to the new relay box. These are the factory accessory wires. So this is the one that is always hot to the battery. And this is the one that is there. What I think we're going to do is go ahead and remove these factory plugs, because at this point they're not doing us any favors. And we'll go ahead and clean up a little bit of this wiring before we put our switch panel in. Also gets rid of this extra splice that's in here from a previous project. Kind of coming down to the last little bit of this. Wired up the switch panel inside where it was nice and warm. Didn't have to worry about it. We know that this needs to share the connection with the CB, because we know that's our switched. We're going to take the dedicated other link to our 12-volt outlet here. This goes to the orange wire that we've got. And then we have a wiring diagram as I work my way through my very best to have every one of these triggers, switches have its own color. And we just need to work our way through one at a time, connecting everything up. And hopefully, and this is where we get into the game, if I did every step of this correctly along the way, this just works. Or, more likely, we move into the troubleshooting which relay, which switch isn't functioning as expected. So, I'm going to ask my assistant here to help me out in terms of what color. So the first thing we're going to look for is a rear locker.
If I'm reading that right, it's white. No. Oh, rear locker, green.
Should be a green wire. And if you check in here, we should have just a green without any additional notations. And there is a green wire for my rear locker. Okay.
Front locker is purple.
With no additional notations.
Looking.
Okay, so that leaves only
White.
the white.
Just happens to be a little on the short side.
That is just a little shorter than all of the other wires. It has been expanded.
Your spot's second one over, right? Yep.
Correct. And he is connected.
Okay, with the custom 3E fab kit came the little brackets. They are marked left and right as you switch sides. And they just slide on like that. Preferably not compressing wires, but you get the point. Slide the other side on. That gives you the screw mounting holes.
Which are necessary.
Tuck the wires all up.
Nice and neat. So for all the marbles, the final install of the dash bezel. And with that, the last step for this is the 2 screws and then snap down the piece at the top. And the dash is back together. So the amplifier has its own power supply and ground. So this is just connecting the ground up for it. And we'll go ahead and ground it down here with this little module. Okay, so the first thing we see with the ignition on is most, at least, of the switches clearly have power. Pillar lights.
And the seat heater. Seat heater should be same color.
So, possibly the compressor. Okay.
Veo un daño, veo un mal, veo negatividad. Si es Es importante que vean. Vulnerable mi amigo y no solo.
Say I want to do something more than that. I want to give back. He moved to Denver, and one of the first things he undertook was seeing 5 Point in particular as a
It got dark in here.
Okay, so then color lights, definitely illumination is not working. Okay, so the illumination on 3 of them is no good.
Yep.
Okay.
And if any of this looks weird, it's because I color coded them to basic function.
Okay. Now turn on the parking lights. So you get the backlit. We did not. We got the backlit on the DRL.
But not either seat or the compressor.
So these 2, it's probably a ground problem. Although the grounds for this illumination versus the ground for the other are separate.
Can you also notice we didn't get the illumination for the 12 volt?
That's a known issue.
Okay. We did for that one. Yeah.
Okay. Alrighty. Go ahead and.
Good. My new headlights. They work. Got CarPlay hooked up.
We have CarPlay.
We have a really slow network out here, though.
That's because we're living inside a Faraday cage.